Hey friends, SGT here, and you know him as Ranting Andy Hoffman. He's a good friend of ours, and he's back. Andy Hoffman from Miles Franklin, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be back, and as I noted in our last call, I had written a piece called Gold Sentiment 101, and sure enough, gold goes up, and all of a sudden the podcast hits every time we talk go up.
Yeah, well, I don't think you give yourself enough credit. I don't know that it's so much about sentiment as it's about people want to know your sentiment. I mean, every time we talk, the truth cuts through, Andy, and I'm going to refer to one of your recent posts here called Hyperinflation Nation, which you wrote right after QE3 was announced, and you really summarized how I was feeling on that specific day when I marched into my boss's office, and I said, you can mark this day down on your calendar as really the day, the beginning of the end, the day the Republic died. And you wrote, I'm writing this rant nearly in tears, and I'm not kidding. The Fed has announced overt QE3, no ifs, ands, or buts, and the fuse on the keg, representing the time to protect yourself, has been lit shortly to explode. I shared that piece with James Turk on my recent call with him, Andy, and he agreed with you 100%. It's horrifying.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to gold and silver are not investments; they are money. It's really just about protecting what you have. And anytime I think of you get so caught up in the prices going up and down, and part of it is you don't want to lose what you have, and part of it is the greed of wanting to quote make money. But when it comes down to it, what's underscoring everything that we talk about is, as you say, it's the collapse of the fiat currency system, which brings with it a lot of horrible things such as social unrest, hyperinflation, and of course draconian government actions. And you see around the world all these anti-American protests. You're seeing Japan and China, their World War II angers are flaring up again, and there's not a doubt in my mind that this is rooted in economic problems and the resultant anger that results from it.
Yeah, I agree. And getting back to your piece, Hyperinflation Nation, I mean, you put the name hyperinflation in the title for a reason, Andy, and I talked briefly about this with James Turk and he corrected me on this. I had wrongly said that he had predicted between 2014 and 2016 we would see $400 silver and $8,000 gold. That's a 10-year prediction Turk had made, and he corrected me and he said his prediction actually was that we'd see it in 2013 to 2015. 2013 is right around the corner. And my point is that he also feels, as does John Williams, that is round about the time we may see hyperinflation. And people are unprepared. People are going to get crushed. I mean, let's talk about that.
Right. And I've seen, very, very thoughtful analyses about how things have happened in the past and how they may happen this time around. But the fact is that everything that's happening now is unprecedented. The only thing that we can be sure of, and that's why I've based my life around it, is that the currencies will collapse one at a time, and ending with the reserve currency, the dollar, and that real money will go up, in unison. And when I say go up, I really mean it's just going to go to an infinite level in these collapsing currencies, because obviously the assets, gold and silver, don't ever change. And 2013, 15. They're all nice numbers, but who knows what will happen? What if there's a war with Iran that starts this year? What if it starts right around the election, as some people predict, and it blows up to something much worse, and oil prices explode, and the currencies collapse in November or December? I mean, what's to say that can't happen in 2015? Could be then. I mean, there are people who say, well, first we'll see a deflation, then we'll see an inflation. I mean, these are just based on historical, it happened this way at this time and this way at this time. But if you look at hyperinflations, and I put a list of them in my last newsletter, our quarterly newsletter, just in the 20th century alone, there's been 30, 40, 50 of them. And if you go back to the first Chinese one, like 1,000 years ago, there's been hundreds of them. And they all happen in different ways, and they can happen extremely predictably or extremely unpredictably. And given that we have 7 billion people in the world, and we have a unisex global collapse of economies, and it's the first time in history that every single currency is fiat, anything could happen at any time. And I would put the odds on 2016 as no different as the odds of next month.
Well, you mentioned World War III, and I want to talk about that because there couldn't be an issue more important. It's really more important than talking about hyperinflation because, hyperinflation, I guess, is technically survivable, if you have a garden, and you can survive the death of a currency, but none of us are going to survive World War III. And there are different folks from all walks of life now coming out and screaming bloody murder against this saber-rattling of going to war with Iran. In fact, Steve Pieczenik was on the Sunday, September 16th edition of the Alex Jones Show, in which he specifically called out Netanyahu and Romney and the neocons as those that would back this World War III scenario, with Israel really calling for a war against Iran. It's not anything the world needs, which is what Steve Pieczenik said in that interview. In fact, it's the last thing the world needs. And my point is that it seems that the world is on the cusp of either a great new awakening or actual hell on earth. What's your take on what I just said?
Well, a great new awakening is more of a spiritual concept, because there's no way that the mindset of the world is changing anytime soon. And historically, the only thing that changes the mindset are great wars that wipe people out and cause people to, cause reality to slam them in the head. Especially right now, we have so many people around the world that are on the dole from the government that they really have no choice other than to believe the mainstream propaganda. I write about war all the time. I started out as a major Vietnam War buff. I just was amazed as I went through the history of what a horrific, catastrophic that war that was based on memes of the time, like communism's going to take over the world, that were absolutely ridiculous, and the need to go in, or so it wouldn't spread to us, and then the false flags attacks that created it, and the 55,000 U.S. soldiers and several million Vietnamese that died for naught. And when you look at history, that's the kind of things that occur when you have high inflation, when you have angst around the world and falling economies. And I fully expect that the only real resolution to the situation we're in now is going to be hostility somewhere, and I hope and pray that it's not as blatantly obvious as what's going on with Israel and Iran. It's like, Netanyahu is a maniac, and Romney has pretty much said he wants to that they are enemies, that Russia is our enemy, and Obama, he doesn't really tip his hand, but I'm pretty sure that when push comes to shove, he's going to be no different. And I fear, as you do, if anything ever starts between those two countries, because I think that there's an economic interest of pretty much every major nation in the world to defend one or the other side, and I think it would inevitably lead to mass deaths, and of course the hyperinflation of currencies would be accelerated.
Yeah, I'm so glad you touched on that. You used the term false flags, and we talk about that a lot on my website, and it's always been one of my litmus tests for truth tellers. Do you know what a false flag is? Do you talk about false flags? Can you identify them? You clearly do, as does Pieczenik on that Sunday the 16th broadcast, which is a must-listen for anybody who wants to Google that, because he talked about 9/11 being a false flag, which is really a jaw-dropper for a lot of people. And he talked about the fact that, what we're going through right now is a false flag with this killing of the ambassador. He talked about the fact that he's no supporter of Obama, but at least Obama is standing in the way of World War III by not greenlighting Netanyahu to invade Iran or to drop bombs on Iran or to have our military do it. The point is, Andy, is that there seems to be endless false flag warfare going on, even as it relates to currencies. I know that you're troubled by what you see in the yen and other currencies. Let's talk specifically about the problems in Japan with their currency.
Right, and I facetiously call it the land of the setting sun. It's really a horrific situation that's going on there. Between there, I wrote a piece called Demographic Hell, because they have the world's oldest population and the worst demographics. They now have this nuclear disaster that's going to go on for decades because of Fukushima. And, of course, they've been losing market share, manufacturing market share that they once dominated in, to other parts in the East like South Korea and China. In fact, you saw it. They announced a $10 billion monthly deficit, trade deficit, which was just shocking. This is Japan, which is once the greatest manufacturing power in the world. In every way, shape, and form, that nation is going downhill. They were 10 years ahead of us with their market crash simply because their population is 10 years older than ours. So they've been doing QE for 10 years longer than us, and it's the poster child for disaster. We have $16 trillion debt over here, and yes, I know we have more for Fannie Mae and our unfunded liabilities, but just the public debt there is $12.5 trillion, and they have only a third of the population, and it continues to go higher. and they also have their zero interest rates, and the demographics are not going to support the people continuing to buy zero interest rate bonds for much longer. And again, what you're talking about is they announced yesterday. They announced that they're adding another $125 billion to their already $900 billion QE program. All they got was the Nikkei went up 1%. Today it was down 2%. But more importantly, and I've been writing this for some time, I don't even think the Bank of Japan really cares about the economy anymore. All they want is to get the yen down, or I should say the financial markets. They just want to get the yen down, and they can't do it. It keeps surging to new highs. When they announced it, the yen surged. Today it surged further. It's absolutely amazing that they can't even weaken their currency. And if you remember a year and a half ago at Fukushima, where the yen was actually weaker than it is today, the G7 had to meet to decide to weaken the yen after it was destroyed by a nuclear disaster tsunami. So the point is, it doesn't matter how much money they print. They can't get what they want. They're going to continue to collapse on all cylinders, just like the U.S. will despite QE3, just like the ECB. Europe will despite their MOT. It's all money printing, and right now we've reached the point of no return.
Okay, guys, stay tuned for part 2. Andy and I are going to talk about QE. We're going to talk about bond buying in perpetuity in the ECB. And we're going to talk about Max Kaiser's prediction for a total worldwide global collapse in April. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching.